Have you ever wondered if your thoughts actually shape your reality? Not just in the motivational poster sense, but in the deeper, more structural way, where your inner world and outer world are intimately connected. There's an idea, ancient and modern, that we exist inside a vast, invisible field, a living matrix of potential. And in that field, every possibility already exists. It doesn't just sit passively waiting, it responds to our thoughts, our emotions, our intentions. That's where this gets interesting. Can we actually use our minds to change our lives? Is that something anyone can learn? Or is it just the privilege of a few? These are real questions worth sitting with. Because the truth is, none of us wakes up perfect. We carry versions of ourselves. Some that feel stuck, some we're trying to grow into. Maybe you've stood in front of a mirror and seen both of those versions reflected back. The one you're used to, and the one you imagine becoming. Some days, that future version feels close. Other days, it might as well be a stranger. But neither version is any more or less real. They're both stories held inside your nervous system, shaped by thought and memory, by emotion and expectation. It's the same when we reflect on how we behave, maybe as a parent, a partner, a friend. We judge ourselves, sometimes gently, sometimes not. But every judgment still comes from the same place, a model in the mind. One version of you sees failure, another sees resilience. The question is, can we step back far enough to see that both are just reflections? Because here's the deeper point. Those reflections aren't fixed. They're fluid. The self isn't carved in stone. It's more like a signal. And that signal responds to belief. If you've tried to change before, whether physically, emotionally, spiritually, and it didn't last. Maybe the failure wasn't in your effort. Maybe it wasn't your brain. Maybe it had less to do with willpower and more to do with a quiet assumption you carried all along, that your life is the way it is because that's just how it works. But what if that assumption is the very thing you're being called to break? Here's the shift. If you want to change your life, you have to start by changing how you understand reality itself. Most people try to change their circumstances, fix habits, chase goals, get healthier, happier, more successful, but they're still rooted in the same assumptions about the world, about who they are, about what's possible. And until those assumptions shift, most efforts fizzle out, not because they weren't sincere, but because they didn't go deep enough. The real change begins in belief. Not belief in the sense of blind faith, but the kind that shapes how we interpret experience. The kind that tells us whether we're in charge of our lives or just passengers on a ride we don't control. If you believe your thoughts are random, fleeting, and mostly insignificant, you'll let them pass unchecked. But if you genuinely understand that your thoughts carry weight, that they're electric signals echoing into the very structure of what's real, you start to pay attention. You become more intentional, more aware. And that's the difference between hoping things will change and actually shifting the ground you stand on. We've all heard it before. Your thoughts create your reality. But how many of us live like that's actually true? If we really believed it, wouldn't we guard our thoughts like we guard our health? Wouldn't we train our attention to rest where we want life to grow, rather than obsessing over problems and reliving the past? It's a tough question, but it's also a doorway. Because once you start to live as if your thoughts matter, not just personally, but fundamentally, you begin to tap into a different kind of power, a creative power. One that doesn't just react to circumstances, but participates in shaping them. So let's say this clearly, you are not stuck. The reality you're living now is not your final draft. You're not limited by what's already happened. But the way forward isn't about effort alone. It's about perspective. If you can shift the way you see reality, you can change the way you relate to it. And when that changes, everything else is allowed to shift with it. Your behavior, your body, your relationships, your path. But it all begins with a question. Am I willing to see the world and myself differently? If we really want to change, we have to look at how we got here, how the dominant lens through which we view the world was shaped. For centuries, most of our understanding of reality was based on separation. Mind and matter were seen as distinct, one mysterious and subjective, the other physical and measurable. In this worldview, the body was a machine, the brain a kind of control tower, and consciousness just a byproduct, an afterthought that emerged once neurons fired in just the right way. This view gave rise to extraordinary scientific advances, yes, but it also left something out, something vital. It told us we are separate from the world around us, that reality is out there, objective and indifferent, and we are in here, watching, analyzing, maybe trying to make sense of it, but ultimately divided from it. That idea of separation is what many of us were raised into, often without realizing it. It shapes how we approach our lives. It's why we often feel like we have to fight circumstances, control outcomes, or fix things out there before we can feel peace in here. But what if that whole premise is incomplete? What if mind and matter aren't separate after all? What if we're immersed in a field, call it energy, consciousness, the quantum fabric, that responds not just to our actions but to our awareness? Modern physics and ancient wisdom traditions both suggest this, that consciousness isn't an after effect of the brain, but a foundational property of the universe itself. That it's not something we have, it's something we are. And if that's true, then our thoughts aren't just electrical patterns in the brain. They're signals, ripples in a field that connects all things, which means that how we think, feel, and focus doesn't just affect our inner life, it interacts with the very structure of reality. That's not wishful thinking. It's not about manifesting luxury cars or bypassing effort. It's a call to participate in life in a new way. Because if your thoughts do shape your experience, then learning to become conscious of them and intentional with them isn't just self-help, it's evolution. And right now, you're invited to become a more active part of that experience. So if your thoughts hold power, if your mind is more than just a passenger in the journey of life, what stops us from using that power every day? Often, it's the subtle, quiet beliefs we hold beneath the surface. We've been taught that change is hard, that life is fixed, that who we are is mostly set by our past. And so we look at our circumstances, our job, our relationships, our health, and assume they're reflections of something we can't control. We might wish for something different, but we rarely believe at a deep level that we can actually create something different. But what if we could? What if change doesn't require force, but awareness? There's a reason this idea can be uncomfortable. Because if it's true, if your internal world really does shape your outer one, then it means you're not just a product of your environment. You're a co-creator of it. And that's both empowering and humbling, because it also means you're responsible, not in a shame-driven way, but in the sense that what you think, believe, and feel matters. Not just to you, but to what unfolds around you. That's why the work begins with awareness, not willpower, not positive thinking, not control, awareness. When you begin to notice the patterns you run, the thoughts that loop, the feelings that flare, the reactions that repeat, you create space. You interrupt the automatic. You loosen the grip of the familiar future trying to repeat itself. And in that space, something new can arise. Okay, that's where transformation begins. Not in trying to become someone else, but in remembering that you were never limited to the version of you that the past wrote. Every time you pause and choose differently, you write a new line into the script, and over time, those lines form a new story. Not because you forced it, but because you became aware enough to stop acting out the old one. The deeper we go, the clearer it becomes. Reality isn't just something we observe, it's something we participate in. But for most of us, the idea that our inner state affects the outer world still feels abstract. We might say it, nod along with it, even hope it's true, but we haven't always lived it. That's because we've inherited a worldview that split things in two: mind and matter, thought and thing, the internal and the external. For centuries, that duality was the dominant model. It told us that the physical world was objective, fixed, and unaffected by what we think or feel. That consciousness was something confined inside the skull, an afterthought, not a force. But science has begun telling a different story. In quantum mechanics, particles behave differently when they are observed. Possibility collapses into a specific outcome the moment attention is applied. This isn't just theoretical, it's experimental, and it raises a profound question. What role does the observer play? You are that observer. And just like the scientist at the edge of discovery, your awareness is shaping what unfolds. When we begin to truly understand that the boundary between thought and reality is porous, that what we hold in our mind has weight, trajectory, even influence, then change becomes not just possible, but inevitable. Because we no longer live reactively, we live responsibly, consciously. So what does this mean for your life? It means the world is not closed to you. It means you are not fated to live out the same emotional scripts, the same limiting beliefs, the same unexamined habits. It means that your attention, your focus, your clarity, they matter. It means that every single time you choose to align your thoughts with the life you want to live, you aren't just imagining that reality. You're interacting with the field of potential in which it already exists. This is not wishful thinking. It's participatory living. And it asks something of you. Not perfection, not control, but willingness. Willingness to stop repeating what no longer serves. To step into the unknown without proof. To remember that the life you desire may already exist, waiting for you to become the version of you that you need it. The journey to change begins not with effort, but with awareness. And awareness, true awareness, isn't passive. It's the active recognition that we're not stuck in our past unless we choose to be. It's realizing that the way we felt, reacted, and believed up until now does not define what's possible from here. You are not bound by repetition. You are not required to stay inside the frame that was painted by past versions of you. What you think, believe, and feel carries power, not in a vague, motivational sense, but in a deeply real, measurable way. The more you align with that truth, the more your actions begin to reflect it, and the more your world begins to shift in response. No one else can do that for you, but no one can take it from you either. So as we close this reflection, consider this: the life you dream about, the peace, the purpose, the freedom. It doesn't exist somewhere far off, waiting for perfect circumstances or a future version of you to arrive. It begins with the thoughts you allow today, the way you show up for yourself today, the courage to pause, choose differently, and move forward from a deeper truth. Because change doesn't start when life changes, it starts when we do. And maybe, just maybe, that's all the evidence you've ever needed. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more discussions on consciousness, reality, and the mysteries of existence. Leave your thoughts in the comments below.